American Vampire Volume 2, written by Scott Snyder and art by Rafael, Albuquerque, and Mateus Santolouca. Hello everyone, I am back covering American Vampire. I just wrapped up Sweet Tooth, an amazing series. You all gotta go check that out all the way to the end. It has an epic conclusion, really good book. But now we're on American Vampire, and this video we're gonna be covering the 1930s in Las Vegas. So Volume 1, that covered the Old West all the way up to 1920s, and we were in Old Hollywood. We were introduced to Skinner Sweet, this American vampire. There's also Pearl Jones, a new American vampire made by Skinner Sweet. There's also the old school European vampires, which we're going to learn their official name is the Carpathian vampires. So that's the name of their species of vampire. I'm going to be explaining that more in depth within this video. But yeah, 1930s, Las Vegas, we're going to be going through now. Really cool stuff. This is a time where Las Vegas was just starting to come into its own. The Hoover Dam was finishing up its construction. Gambling was just legalized in the city, and a whole bunch of debauchery was starting in Las Vegas. Next volume, Volume 3, after this, is going to take place in the 1940s. And what historical event happened in the 1940s? World War II, of course. So we're going to have us some Nazi vampires in Volume 3. So stay tuned for that. But right now, let's dive into American Vampire Volume 2, Devil in the Sand. Issue 6, Devil in the Sand, Part 1 of 4. Last volume finished around 1925. Now we jump to the year 1936 to Las Vegas. The Hoover Dam is being built, although back then it was just called the Boulder Dam. So the dam is being built. Construction started in 1931, and it is now finally 3 weeks away from finishing construction and opening here in 1936. The Hoover Dam was essential in Las Vegas's development, dramatically increasing its population. Las Vegas also legalized gambling in 1931 to increase revenue from all the dam workers who came into town after work or on payday. So Las Vegas was becoming a very different city than it was prior. The building of the Hoover Dam was a project too expensive for one company to take on by themselves. So it was a joint effort of 4 different companies that came together to form a business consortium. The heads of those 4 companies were Howard Bellieu, Daniel Philmott, Blaine Isbell, and Mr. Gracie. This volume begins. We see a fat man named Howard Bellieu. He is the president of Bellieu Engineering, one of the 4 firms hired to build the Hoover Dam in a joint project as part of that business consortium. This Howard Bellieu is having sex with a prostitute named Jennifer at a place called the Peabody Hotel. This is a regular occurrence, and Howard, he's pretty infatuated with this Jennifer, and Jennifer finds Howard to be a courteous, nice customer, and she is happy to satisfy him. Jennifer, she takes her money and leaves. It's about late afternoon right now, about 5:30. Well, later that night, when Howard is alone and trying to sleep, he is visited by some sort of vampire that comes in through his window. The vampire, it has wings, and it jumps on Howard and drains his body of all his blood. We meet a new character walking the streets of Las Vegas. His name is Cashel McCougan, aka Cash. He is the chief of police in Las Vegas here. He has a pregnant wife, Lily McCougan, back at home. And Cash's father is Gus McCougan. He used to be the chief of police here in Las Vegas before his untimely death. When Cash was a child of 6 years old, he was an orphan. No one really wanted him. He was a scrawny, short kid. But Gus took a liking to little Cash and decided to adopt him. And they had a very close relationship. Eventually, when Gus became chief of police, Cash served as his deputy. Until one day, 2 months ago, Cash's dad, Gus, got killed on the streets of Las Vegas, just out front of a place called The Frontier, ran by a man named Jim Smoke. Cash never found out who killed his dad. So Cash, he is walking the streets of Las Vegas, and he heads into a nearby grocery store. He orders up some milk from the grocer, and he has a pleasant conversation with the guy. All of a sudden, some tough guys on the street walk into the grocery store, and they start giving the grocery clerk some trouble, inquiring on where they can buy some booze, and they try to extort money from the clerk. Cash, he isn't having any of this. He starts a fight with the men, punches and elbows them down to the ground. He then points his gun and flashes his badge and arrests the pair. Cash brings the troublemakers down to the Las Vegas Police Department to be booked. The cells are too full though, no problem though. Cash just locks them in a janitor's closet. Cash then walks over to one of his deputies, a man named Glenn. Cash is complaining about the lack of support in their police department and why the FBI hasn't bothered to show up yet. But Glenn informs Cash that the FBI have indeed shown up. Cash is then introduced to a man named Jack Straw, an FBI agent, a capable one who has been in the FBI for 20 years. Jack Straw is also a part of a secret organization called the Vassals of the Morning Star, a secret group set on destroying all vampires. That is secret information for now, though. No one knows this. Jack Straw's assistant is Felicia Book. She is also part of the Vassals of the Morning Star. You should remember Felicia Book from Volume 1. She is the daughter of James and Abelina Book. James Book was that Pinkerton agent who arrested Skinner Sweet, but whom Skinner Sweet later turned into a vampire, and James then ended up asking to be killed as he didn't want to be a vampire anymore? Well, Abelina and Felicia have dedicated themselves to killing Skinner Sweet. So Felicia has joined this group, the Vassals of the Morning Star, as a way to eventually get her revenge on Skinner Sweet and kill him. Felicia, she was just a little girl last volume, while she is now 24 years old. Cash, Jack, and Felicia are all talking. They discuss how Cash's father got murdered, and how that is unresolved, and Cash also complains about how his police department is underfunded and drowning in police work, and he can't believe he only got the 2 of them for help. Glenn explains that there has been a homicide at the Peabody Hotel, and Cash needs to check it out. So, Cash, Jack Straw, and Felicia Book head over to the Peabody Hotel. It is now 11 a.m. They meet a Mr. Starr, the owner of the Peabody Hotel. Mr. Starr shows them the now drained body of Howard Beaulieu in his hotel room. The body was found at 6 a.m. by a maid. Jack and Felicia make note of the puncture wounds and how no fluids are left in the body. All of a sudden, the deputy mayor joins them in the hotel room, and the deputy mayor tells Cash that Howard Beaulieu was an important man, and his death needs to be solved as soon as possible. The Hoover Dam is having its ribbon-cutting ceremony in 3 weeks. Cash, he has the elevator boy brought to him for questioning. The elevator boy arrives, and Cash wants to know if anyone visited Howard the night before. The elevator boy says that Howard was visited by a prostitute and she works out of a stable called the Frontier. Cash, hearing the name The Frontier, says, "God damn it." He is not happy to hear that name. The Frontier is a brothel owned by a man that goes by the name Jim Smoke, who Cash spoke to previously in connection with his father's murder. Cash, he phones his pregnant wife, Lily, on the phone and tells her all about his day and how he has to go visit this Jim Smoke again in connection to another crime. And she tells her husband to be careful and control himself around this Jim. Cash says he will, and he'll be home in a bit afterwards. So Cash, Jack, and Felicia head over to the Vegas red light district to go to this frontier and talk to this Jim Smoke. When they arrive at the frontier, Jim Smoke's bodyguard is giving them some trouble, but Felicia, she puts him in a headlock and he eventually relents and lets them into the hotel. He tells them Jim Smoke is expecting you anyway. So they are let in to see this Jim Smoke, the pimp and proprietor of the frontier brothel, and it is revealed that Jim Smoke is actually Skinner Sweet himself. He is just going by this alias, Jim Smoke. Skinner tells them, "Morning, officers. How can I be of service?" As he is chewing on some candy, and he has a naked girl by his side and two more on the couch behind him. Issue 7, Devil in the Sand, Part 2 of 4. Cash is questioning Skinner Sweet, or as he's known here, Jim Smoke. Cash tells Skinner about the dead body of Howard Bellia and how one of his girls was seen with Howard the previous night. Skinner, he's being a cocky douche about everything, but he eventually lets Cash question the girl. Jennifer, the prostitute, who is naked here, she says that she spent some time with Howard the night before, but she was back here at 6 o'clock because she had a date at 6:30. Skinner says her 6:30 date was an Officer Pal down at your precinct, Cash, so you should have no trouble checking her alibi. Cash, he thanks them for their information and he gets ready to leave. And Jennifer tells Cash to tell Officer Pal she can't wait to see him again. And Skinner can't resist adding, "Yeah, Chief, tell him, will ya?" Felicia, she grows angry at this remark, and she starts losing it at Skinner, and she tells him that his days are numbered, and she is held back by her partner Jack Straw, though. Once they all leave the frontier, Felicia yells at Cash for being soft on them, and Cash argues back that it's not easy for him to stand there with Jim Smoke, who's suspect number 1 in his father's murder, and to not rip his head off. But his dad, Gus, believed in respect for the law and rights for everyone, even trash like Jim Smoke. And he is embarrassed with Felicia's lack of professionalism in there. Besides, he deduces that Howard Bellia was not killed by that prostitute Jennifer. She weighs like 110 pounds and doubts she was capable of draining Howard of all of his blood. Also, he does not think Howard died around 5 p.m. or so when he was with her. He suspects that Howard died later in the night, hours after she left. Felicia apologizes for her outburst, and they all pile into a car together and drive onward. Later that night, Cash retires to his home with his wife, Lily. He holds her in bed and cradles her belly and feels his unborn son kicking from within. Across town, Jack and Felicia are in a hotel room. They are going over notes from the day. Felicia, she thinks that the radius of the fang marks on the victim mean that it wasn't a common Carpathian European vampire they are dealing with. Now, this is the first time we've heard this word Carpathian in this series. So first, a quick overview of the different vampire species we've seen so far. So the Carpathian vampire is essentially the classic European vampire we've seen so far. Their first appearance was in the 1400s, and they're known as Carpathian vampires because they tend to originate from this area in Europe called the Carpathian Mountains. And around those mountains are countries like Romania, Ukraine, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Serbia. The Carpathian vampires will die in the sun. They're weak to wood, especially pine. They're also not good swimmers. They can't swim. And their physical traits are they have red eyes and they cast no reflection. whereas the American vampire, or Homo abominum americana, first appeared in 1800 with Skinner Sweet in Colorado. In the sun, they are immune. Their weakness is unknown, although they do seem to be weaker during the moonless night. Their physical traits are their yellow eyes, their elongated claw-like fingers, their rattlesnake-like fangs, and their distorted reflections. While Felicia thinks that the fang marks they saw on Howard Beaulieu don't fit the Carpathian or American vampire, they perhaps belong to an older species of vampire, maybe Gaelic? Now Gaelic usually refers to Scotland. Now Jack asks her if she's okay after what happened earlier today. Felicia, she apologizes that she almost blew their cover with Cash earlier when she had that outburst at Skinner Sweet. And she reiterates that she is happy to be stationed with Jack on this assignment for the Vassals of the Morning Star, especially with Skinner Sweet being based here as well, and her personal history with him. Jack, he accepts her apology. They both think that whoever killed this Howard Beaulieu was doing it to slow down the building of the dam, as well as settle a score with the people building it. Jack, he leaves to go to his own hotel room for the night. Hiding in the shadows of Felicia's hotel room is Skinner Sweet. He says to her, "Boo!" Felicia's a little bit startled, and Skinner says, "I'm sorry, did I scare you?" And Felicia replies, "What do you want, sweet?" Skinner says to her, "You know, it took me a minute to put it together, to realize who you are. I can smell him on you, though." Skinner knows that Felicia is the daughter of James Book, his old nemesis. Felicia tells him to get out, and Skinner replies, "Sheesh, all right. I only came to welcome you to Las Vegas, and to remind you of that deal I have with your little group, which is..." Felicia cuts in, "Immunity, we can't touch you, I know." And Skinner says, "Now ain't that a shame? Night-night," and he leaves. So we've learned a little bit here that this group, the Vassals of the Morning Star, they have some sort of agreement with Skinner Sweet that they won't touch him. The next day, over at the Hoover Dam construction, Cash, Jack, and Felicia go to visit with a Daniel Philmont. He is one of the other business heads of the 4 companies that came together to build the dam. Now, Daniel, he is pontificating about how the dam is the single greatest engineering feat in history. It's their legacy, and it's nothing less than an American pyramid. Cash, he doesn't care about any of this. He reiterates to Mr. Philmont that Howard Beaulieu, one of his partners, is dead. And who does he think might want to kill Howard, or perhaps other members of their consortium of 4? Daniel Philmont brushes it off and says, "Why, any of the construction workers might hate their bosses and might want to kill Howard. I could give you a name of 3,000 people. It could be any one of them." Philmont, he's not taking any of this too seriously. Cash shows him a picture of Howard Beaulieu's dead body, and he tells Philmont, "Someone murdered one of your 3 consortium partners, drained him of every drop of blood, and whoever did this is still out there." Daniel Philmont is now a little shaken by the gruesomeness of the photo. He excuses himself and goes into his office to make a phone call. On the phone, Daniel Philmont is talking to one of his partners, and this partner appears to be a vampire of sorts, and he is telling the vampire on the phone all about the police's investigation and Howard's dead body. The vampire on the phone tells Philmont to calm himself. They've already sent a team to Las Vegas to investigate, and they should be there by tomorrow. This makes Philmont feel a little bit better. All of a sudden, though, he hears a crash, and there is a vampire in the room with him. It is the same vampire that killed Howard last issue. We can tell from this vampire's appearance, it is a different species of vampire than the Carpathian vampire that Daniel was talking to on the phone. Daniel says, "No, please," but the vampire jumps on him and kills him as well. Cash, Jack, and Felicia are nearby talking. They hear the screams coming from Daniel Philmont's office. They run inside and see his dead body with blood splattered on the wall. And Jack sees a hole in the floor and says it must have used the drainage duct to escape. Cash, he is frustrated. He says, "All right, that's enough. I've had my doubts about both of you since the moment you showed up. Something is killing people in my town, and you both know something you are not telling me. What are you hiding? Tell me now, or so help me God." Felicia yells for Cash to stop. She'll talk, she'll tell him, but before she explains though, she asks, "What do you know about vampires?" Jumping away from Las Vegas for a bit, over to Arrowhead, California. We see Abelina Book, who is now 46 years old. She is the mother of Felicia Book and the wife of James Book. Abelina also works for the Vassals of the Morning Star like her daughter. She is with her partner named Lyndon Hobbs. Lyndon is the leader of the Vassals of the Morning Star. They are there to confront Pearl Jones, the wannabe actress who got turned into an American vampire last volume by Skinner Sweet. Pearl, she is there with her husband, Henry Preston. Issue 8, Devil in the Sand, Part 3 of 4. Lyndon Hobbs and Abelina Book have their gun and crossbow out, and they inform Pearl that they want to chat. Pearl and Henry are not thrilled about it, but they invite the two of them in for a talk. Inside Pearl and Henry's home, Abelina introduces her and Lyndon and explains they work for a group called the Vassals of the Morning Star. They are a group of vampire killers. Lyndon explains that every species of vampire has their own weakness, whether it be wood, iron, or steel. Well, they want Pearl to tell them her weakness. Pearl, she's a little taken aback. They want her to tell them how to kill her? She asks, "Assuming I even know what my own weakness is, why would I ever tell you?" And Lyndon explains, "I won't pretend to be anything but your enemy, Pearl, but now and then, out of necessity, I have struck a bargain with members of your kind in order to get to more pressing threats." Pearl asks, "You're after Skinner Sweet, aren't you? Let me guess, you couldn't kill him, so you tried striking a deal with him instead. How did that work out for you?" Lyndon threatens her, saying, "Maybe we don't know how to kill you, but we have very deep pockets and can make life very difficult for you." Lyndon demands an answer. Pearl says that she hasn't killed anyone since 1925, and she is trying to live a good life with Henry here, the man she loves. And as bad as Skinner Sweet is, he gave her this life, and as nasty as he is, she won't hand him over to the likes of them. Her answer is no. Lyndon tells her that if she changes her mind, they are staying at the local inn in town until tomorrow. Abelina tells Pearl that she'll regret this. Pearl replies sarcastically, "I'm shaking. Drive safe now." We jump back over to Las Vegas. Jack Straw and Felicia Book are talking to Cash McCougan and are discussing the now dead body of Daniel Philmont. They are trying to convince Cash that these deaths are connected to vampires and that they work for a group that hunts vampires. Cash, he thinks this is ridiculous. He doesn't believe them for a minute, and he storms off, and he tells them not to interfere with this investigation ever again. Across town, we see a group of 5 vampires have arrived in Las Vegas, and they are checking into their hotel. These vampires are here to investigate the death of Howard Beaulieu, and they appear to be connected with this business consortium that was working on the construction of the dam. Cash, he is talking on the phone back to the police station. He asks them if they were able to get in touch with Blaine Isbell, one of the other consortium heads. The cop back at the precinct says that Blaine took off. He was scared for his life with 2 of his business partners now dead. Can't blame him. So he packed his stuff and he's heading east. Cash says that if they do manage to get a hold of him, to tell him to come down to the station where they can protect him. Cash right now, he's gonna drive over to Mr. Gracie's estate to visit the last remaining consortium head. Cash goes back to talk with Jack and Felicia, and despite not believing their vampire bullshit fully, he needs their help tonight. There's a murderer to catch, and the murderer's moving fast. We jump over to this Blaine Isbell, one of the other consortium heads. He was scared, and he was trying to leave town in his limousine before he gets killed himself. He is having his driver drive him out of town while he sits in the back seat with a gun in his hands, trying to keep alert if anything comes up. Mr. Isbell, he's paranoid. He tells his driver to be quick. All of a sudden, that same mysterious vampire responsible for killing Howard Beaulieu and Daniel Philmont shows up. This vampire has wings and can fly, and it manages to swoop down on the road and lift Mr. Isbell's car right off the street. We see Cash, Felicia, and Jack. They're driving. Cash, he asks them, assuming for a second that it is a vampire doing all these killings, how is it that your organization knew to send you to before the murders even started happening? And Jack explains about a month ago, they got credible info about a rare kind of older vampire species that for some reason was nesting in Las Vegas. Why the creature chose Las Vegas or to kill these people, he simply does not know. Cash, he's driving, and all of a sudden, he notices Mr. Isbell's car in the sky, and it all of a sudden starts dropping down to the earth, and it hits the ground and explodes right nearby them. Cash, Jack, and Felicia, they park the car and they go to investigate this car that fell from the sky. They realize it is in fact the limo of Blaine Isbell, and he is now dead as well. Cash, he is starting to come around to believing Jack and Felicia. Cash, Jack, and Felicia, they arrive to the estate of Mr. Gracie, the final living member of the business consortium responsible for building the Hoover Dam. Cash tells Mr. Gracie that his other 3 business partners are dead, and they believe he is in imminent danger. Mr. Gracie replies, "So, I got Isbell too. Come in, quick." Mr. Gracie says that they are hunkered down tight. Mr. Gracie, he's got a big machine gun in his hands. He seems like a capable guy. Cash suggests they go to the police station. It will be safer there. Mr. Gracie to this says, "We're at war. War with a goddamn monster straight out of hell." Jack Straw, surprised, asks, "So, you know then?" And Mr. Gracie replies, "About what? Vampires? Christ, who do you think convinced them to invest here in the first place?" Mr. Gracie explains that his business consortium, even together, the 4 of them, couldn't have made a pitch low enough to the government to outbid the other bigger guys that were competing against them. So, they got themselves a silent partner who would donate enough capital, say $7.5 million, and with their little group of 4, they could march right up to Capitol Hill and propose a $50 million contract to build the Hoover Dam at a price of just $40 million. A consortium of 4 companies underwritten by a secret 5th, a bank. And Cash jumps in, "A bank run by monsters? You took money from goddamn monsters so you could lowball the Public Works Administration? You brought them to our town?" And Mr. Gracie jumps in and says, "Their blood might be black, Chief, but their money's as green as yours. Funny thing is, they've been perfect business partners." And Cash replies, "Tell that to Beaulieu, Philmont, and Isbell." Mr. Gracie explains these murders aren't the doing of our silent partners. Hell, our guys are as eager to make the killing stop as you are. So say what you will, but this isn't some double cross. And Cash says, "No, it's a vampire grudge match, and you put our city in the middle of it." So this 4-person business consortium made a deal with some rich Carpathian vampires, but now the consortium members are being killed by this other vampire, but not the vampire they're in business with, some kind of third party. But who? They hear a crash noise nearby. Cash runs over to check it out, and he sees an old man in black robes. That man is Cash's father, Gus McCougan. But Gus is supposed to be dead. And Gus explains to his son, "I'm not here to hurt anyone." And Cash, shocked, says, "Dad?" And Gus continues, "Don't worry, son. I told you, I'm not here to hurt anyone. Except him." Gus then transforms into his vampire form. And in his vampire form, Gus has wings and looks very bat-like. Gus was responsible for killing the other 3. He is a species of vampire called Gallic Prime. And Gus, in his vampire form, attacks Mr. Gracie and kills him, slashing at him. Gus then escapes by flying out the window. Back over to California, Henry Preston, Pearl's human husband, he decided to secretly take up Abelina Book and Lyndon Hobbs on their offer. He goes and visits them in the inn they are staying at. He talks to Abelina and says he is alone. He offers to tell Abelina what the weakness of Pearl and the American vampires is, and how they can kill Skinner Sweet. He will tell them in exchange for no harm coming to Pearl, either from the vassals of the Morning Star or from anyone else. He makes Abelina swear, and Abelina, she does so. She swears on her husband's grave that no harm will come to Pearl. Henry then tells her that the American vampire is weak to gold. Later that night, Abelina phones her daughter Felicia with the good news. They've finally found out how to kill Skinner Sweet. Issue 9, Devil in the Sand, Part 4 of 4. Cash is with Felicia and Jack in a car. Cash can't believe his dad is a vampire. Felicia and Jack start explaining the specific traits of the Strigus Gallic Prime vampire. So they originated in the 1200s in Ireland and Scotland, and they were almost wiped out in the 1700s by the Carpathian vampires. The sun causes them pain and it prohibits them from changing form, but because of their tougher skin, they can survive it, especially if they took something like a zinc extract or the like. They can fly, and their body requires very little nourishment. They could live off livestock undetected for years. Their main weakness is brass. Felicia is actually in the back seat of the car, and she is pressing some brass bullets on a mini foundry press she has. The 3 of them arrive at some nearby caves. The Gallic Prime vampires like living in caves apparently, and Cash, he knows Vegas well, so he's pretty sure his dad would come here. Cash says he wants to confront his dad alone. Felicia doesn't like the idea, but Cash insists. This is his dad after all. He wants to confront him by himself. Before he heads out into the cave, he does ask Felicia for the gun with the special brass bullets she was preparing. So Cash, he heads out into the cave. He sees the fossilized remains of a skeleton in the cave wall. Cash's dad, Gus, who is there, says, "Cashel, this is Adnat. She was my mate. She would have been your mother, I suppose, if things had been different." Gus explains that he was with this Adnat for over 100 years before they came for them and killed their clan and drove them from their homeland. Gus says he misses his son and apologizes for him getting dragged into this whole mess. Gus explains that he has been a vampire for nearly 700 years, but he was never a killer, not until now. Until they came into our town with their money and vileness. He must be referring to the other Carpathian vampires. Now, before his wife Adnat died, she made Gus promise that he would try to bring goodness into the world. And he chose here in Las Vegas, what was a quiet place at the time, and it was a place he felt the other vampires would likely never follow. And eventually, he adopted Cash. He took Cash in because that's who he was. Gus admits he probably kept the Gus McCougan persona alive longer than he should have, years longer than it was wise to, but he just wanted to see his son Cash grow up and see the kind of man he would become. Now, while Cash and Gus are having their attempt at father-son bonding, they get interrupted. The European Carpathian vampires arrive at the mouth of the cave, and they say to Gus, "How touching. And it will be even more touching when we bury you all together in this tomb. You, your bitch, and your human bastard. You've caused your little disruption. Now it's time to die." Gus, he turns into his vampire form and replies, "See? But I think it's you who's about to die, old enemy." The Carpathian vampires are not worried. They wiped out Gus's entire bloodline centuries ago. The Carpathian vampires taunt Gus by saying, "We're stronger than you, faster than you, you're a relic of a bygone era." All of a sudden, a new voice chimes in and interrupts, and it says, Now, Vlad, that's my line." Skinner Sweet is there as well, and Skinner says to Gus, "Howdy, partner." So, Gus and Skinner Sweet were secretly working together on this whole plan. They have their differences, but they both hate the Carpathian vampires much more and would rather team up and see to their destruction. This whole thing was all a part of this larger plan. Killing the human heads in the consortium was just a lure to get the Carpathian vampires here to this moment into this trap. The Carpathian vampires say, "You'll never prevail." Then we have ourselves an all-out vampire battle. The Carpathian vampires charge at Skinner Sweet and Gus. Cash, Felicia, and Jack are cut off to the side. Felicia tells Cash that the Carpathian vampires are weak to pine, so she gives him some pine wooden bullets, and he loads it into his gun and starts firing. One of the Carpathian vampires almost tears Cash's head off, but his dad saves him at the last moment and grabs that vampire that almost attacked his son and rips that vampire's head off. Jack Straw is firing as well. He yells, "Die, you filth!" But then one of those Carpathian vampires slashes Jack's throat and Felicia yells, "Jack, no!" The vampires then pounce on Felicia and bite into her neck. However, something seems a little bit off with her blood. The vampire pulls back after tasting it and says, "What are you?" So what is the deal with Felicia's blood? Well, her dad, James Book, was an American vampire at the time that she was conceived. Therefore, she has some American vampire blood in her, although she is not a full American vampire. And something about that American vampire blood does not taste good to the Carpathian vampires. Felicia then shoots him in the head. One of the other vampires approaches Gus and tells him, "Now your bloodline dies for good." Before that vampire can finish Gus off though, Cash throws a gun to his dad and Gus blasts that vampire away. Well, the fighting appears over. The Carpathian vampires are all dead here, and Gus is looking at his son, Cash. And Skinner in his white suit says, "Well, that was fun. Now for goodbyes." Skinner then looks at Gus and says, "So long, partner. Brass for you," as he shoots Gus with the brass bullet, killing him. And Cash is yelling at Skinner for shooting his dad, and Skinner explains, "Don't be like that. Your daddy had to expect that was coming. Everyone who meets me knows I'm just plain pitiful at keeping deals, and I've always got to be the last man standing." Skinner, he's gonna shoot Cash now and kill him, but Felicia stands up and shoots Skinner Sweet with a gold bullet right in his gut, and it's lodged in there now. Felicia took her mother's words about Skinner Sweet's weakness and she put it into action and had a gold bullet ready, just in case. Skinner, he actually feels a little sick from the gunshot. The gold is affecting him. He scurries off. Felicia explains to Cash that she shot Skinner with the gold bullet and she only has one more. Cash and Felicia arrive at the Frontier Hotel. They are here to finish Skinner's suite off for good. Felicia says that Skinner will need to get someone to take that gold bullet out if he doesn't want to die of infection. So the two of them storm into the hotel, Cash dropping some Molotov cocktails along the way, lighting the place ablaze. Eventually, as they make their way through the hotel, they find Skinner's suite, but they see that suite has taken Cash's pregnant wife Lily hostage. Skinner mockingly says, "Hey Junior, welcome to the poker table. Care to place a bet?" Skinner has some sort of syringe with his blood in it, and he is threatening to inject it into Cash's wife's belly and infect the child within and create himself a Skinner Jr. It looks like he has already pricked Lily's belly a little bit with the syringe. Cash is sweating. He is scared for the life of his wife and unborn child. Cash, he tells Felicia to lower her gun. Felicia does so. They are all having themselves a standoff of sorts with Skinner. Cash says to let them go. Skinner, he continues to toy and mock them, talking about the possibility of infecting Lily and the baby inside. He says, "I can think clearly now. Of course, I don't want a baby. I don't need one, after all. Guys like me, I think we've pretty much proven these last few years that good old-fashioned wildness, well, it's just too fun and profitable to let it go out of style. And so knowing I played a little part in making this town what it is and what it'll always be, well, that's fatherhood enough for me. Then again, why not?" And Lily yells, "Ow!" So perhaps Skinner pricked her a little bit or did something to her. Worried that Skinner is going to hurt his wife and baby, Cash or Felicia shoot at Skinner again and manage to get him to fall out the window. And Cash, he runs over to his wife and is checking on her. She doesn't look well. He asks her if she is alright and Lily answers no. Felicia says she's gonna go after Skinner. She's worried that he's gonna get away. So Felicia, she's running after him. She heads to the nearby train station to see if she can find Skinner before he disappears again. Skinner's suite is hiding beneath the train car. We hear the conductor yell, "All aboard the train to Los Angeles!" Felicia sees the gold bullet on the floor of the train station. She says, "Damn." She knows that Skinner has survived, and she doesn't know where he is, even though he is so close by. Cash's wife, Lily, was not well. She managed to give birth to the baby, but she died upon childbirth. The baby survived, but it had been infected with the blood from the syringe that Skinner's suite had. So the baby is now a little vampire himself. Cash, he would name his son Gus McCougan, named after his adopted father. And Cash, he took his vampire son and left his old life as chief of police behind, and he began to wander the country with Gus in a sack on his back. Perhaps looking for answers, perhaps looking for a cure. Issue 10, The Way Out, Part 1 of 2. We see kept in a cold, dark room is the American vampire known as Hattie Hargrove. She is licking meat off of a bone. We assumed that Hattie died in Volume 1 when her and Pearl were fighting, and Pearl shoved a star from a Hollywood dressing room down Hattie's throat. But Pearl must have not killed Hattie thoroughly enough, as Hattie survived, although we do see she has a scar on the sides of her lips where the star pierced her. Hattie Hargrove is not in a good place right now. She is being kept prisoner by someone who is trying to find out her weakness, the weakness of the American vampires. A man walks into the room. He is a common Carpathian European vampire. He has white hair and a white beard, and he is well dressed, and he is perhaps some sort of doctor. He is holding a rabbit, and he throws it at Hattie for her to eat. The man announces, "Miss Hargrove, time for our monthly appointment." American vampires like Hattie are weakest when it is a moonless night, and moonless nights only happen once a month. Because of this, this is the only time she is visited by this doctor so that she can be safely tested without fear of Hattie attacking this doctor and being able to overpower him. The doctor pulls out a suitcase filled with various syringes. He needs to test them on Hattie and see if she has any reaction to them, see if he can find her weakness. He says to her, just 5 small pinches today. We're moving on to the major sulfates, see gypsum, ipsum, and so on. The doctor, he has a long pole, and he sticks the syringe in it, and he pokes Hattie with it from a distance. No reaction to this first syringe, so she's not weak to that. Time to move on to the second. Back over to California to Pearl and Henry. They are still enjoying their quiet life, hanging out by the water, being happy. Pearl tells Henry, who used to be a musician before he ran away with Pearl to begin their new life in the new town. She tells him that there's a new place in town that plays jazz music and they'll let people on stage and join in and play if they want. She encourages Henry to do this and get back to a little bit of the old life he had, and she loves watching him play. Henry, he seems into the idea and says, well, he could dust off the old guitar and take her for a spin. So that night, they make love, and Henry lets Pearl take a bite out of him, something that seems routine that they must do regularly. And Pearl is happy with Henry, but she gets sad thinking about a life and future without him one day, and she contemplates turning him into a vampire like her, but she doesn't want to force anything onto him. Back over to Hattie Hargrove being tortured. The doctor vampire comes back into the room this day to visit Hattie. He's a little drunk, been drinking champagne, and he opens a new bottle and pops the cork off and drinks some more. And he is chatting with Hattie and talking, and he ends the night by throwing the champagne bottle at her and it's smashing all over the place. The white-haired doctor vampire leaves, but Hattie, she's kind of pleased. The doctor made a huge mistake and left her unintentionally a little gift, the cork to the bottle of champagne. Now, cork is not huge by any means, but it is made out of wood, which the Carpathian vampires are weak to. Back over to Pearl and Henry. They are at that new jazz place that Pearl told Henry about, and Henry is performing on stage and the crowd is into it, and the owner of the establishment, a bootlegger named Little Feet Beale, he's into Henry's music as well. And after Henry's performance, Little Feet Beale tells Henry he played well, and to call him anytime, to perform again and get in on things. He tells Henry, you still got the juice, man. Little Feet Beale leaves, and at the end of the night, Henry thanks Pearl for talking him into performing here tonight. He had a good time. Back over to Hattie Hargrove. It's time for her next appointment, when the white-haired doctor vampire prepares to begin injecting her with random vials tonight. Hattie has a surprise for him. She has crafted a makeshift weapon using an old bone and a cork from that champagne bottle, and she has created a stake, and she manages to stab it through the doctor's body and causes him to fall back. Hattie then grabs and pulls the doctor closer. She grabs the keys to her locks and frees herself. She then climbs on top of the doctor and stabs him some more with the stake that she made, killing him. Hattie, she stayed down there with him all night, waiting till morning when she figured it would be safer if there were other Carpathian vampires around. Now that it's sunlight, it will be easier for her to get away. So she heads outside, expecting maybe some resistance, other people trying to stop her, but nothing. She got outside and saw that she was just being kept at some random gas station. No guards, no army. She was almost kind of disappointed. Hattie, she burns the gas station to the ground and walks onward. It's been several years, but Hattie, she wants to look up her old friend Pearl and get even with Pearl for everything Pearl did to her. Back over to Henry. He returns to Little Feet Beale's place one day unannounced, He just wants to stop in and say hello and maybe get some more jazz work from his new connection. But when he walks into the place, he sees a whole weird situation going on. Little Feet Beale appears to be some sort of shady blood dealer for vampires, and he is right in the middle of collecting blood from some unsuspecting victims. Henry tries to run away, and Little Feet Beale and his people try to chase after Henry, but luckily Pearl is there to protect him, and she tells Henry to get out of here and run. But some of Little Feet Beale's vampire customers are there to fight Pearl, and they say to Pearl, "You can't leave now, things are about to get jumpin'." Another vampire says to her, "Yeah, the party's just starting." And Pearl says, "Well, since you insist, let's party." And she turns into her bestial vampire form. Issue 11, The Way Out, Part 2 of 2. Vampire fight! Pearl jumps at the European vamps, stabbing her elongated claw fingers through one of their heads. She then decapitates another and cuts another one in half. These Carpathian European vampires are really shitty by comparison, it seems. Even Henry is killing some of them with broken chairs. Henry, he eventually makes a run for it on Pearl's insistence as she continues fighting the vampires here. Henry, he runs outside and gets in their car and starts speeding away. He quickly gets chased in another car by Little Feet Beale and his men. They are chasing after Henry and they begin driving beside him eventually, and they're trying to run him off the road. Then they pull out a Tommy gun and they start firing at him. Eventually, Henry has to get more aggressive in his driving as well, and he runs Little Feet Beale's men off the road to fall down a large cliff. And Henry, he bails out in the last moment and manages to avoid being engulfed in the explosion of the two cars crashing. Eventually, Pearl managed to leave the jazz club and she got into another car and started chasing after Henry. As she is driving, she sees the smoke and fire from the crashed cars, and she grows concerned that maybe Henry has died. She gets out of the car to try and find Henry. Now we see Henry. He is crawling away from the fire of the cars, and Little Feet Beale is standing over him and is going to kill him. But before he does, they exchange a few words first. Henry asks him, "How many guys like me did you sell to those vampires over the years? 50? 100? And Little Feet Beale answers, "More." This Little Feet Beale, he's a career criminal and opportunist through and through. He smuggled girls in the 1920s, booze in the 1930s, and now he's began to smuggle blood for the vampires. One of the ways he would do it is that he would try and attract wannabe musicians struggling, promise them success, and sell their bodies and blood to the vampires. This is why he was being so nice to Henry when Henry performed. He was trying to butter Henry up, so one day he could do the same to him and sell Henry to the vampires. Little Feet Beale does admit, though, for what it's worth, Henry was a pretty fine guitar man. Well, it's time for him to kill Henry, but then of course, just as Little Feet Beale is about to do this, Pearl shows up just at the right moment to save Henry's life, and she slices Little Feet Beale's head off, decapitating him with her claw-like fingers. Henry and Pearl are now safe. After this dangerous, deadly ordeal has passed and they are driving home, they can actually kind of laugh about the close call they just had, that they almost died because of underground blood smugglers working out of a jazz club. Henry jokes, "I don't know about you, but I think that place was a little overrated." And Pearl tells him, "Oh, you're so picky." Pearl, she is sad that Henry is living in this world of monsters thanks to her. She asks Henry if he ever thinks about her turning him into a vampire. Henry admits that he does think about it, and he says that they'll figure it out when the time comes, but he doesn't want to make that decision out of fear. Henry says, "I don't want you to change me because we're frightened of the future, or the past, or what's hiding behind this or that door. Now, today, this is us, and I'm happy with that." And Pearl says, "Me too. Come on, let's get into bed." Now, while all of this was going down with Pearl and Henry, Hattie Hargrove was making her way around. She wound up in a store, and she saw a woman hawking some beauty products there, trying to get the store owner to sell them in the store. Well, the beauty product woman sees Hattie's messed up face, a result of Pearl shoving the star down her throat in Volume 1. While the woman tries to help Hattie with some of her beauty products, see if she can help cover Hattie's scars, and Hattie, she ends up killing them both. The store owner and the beauty product woman, and she applies some makeup herself. Hattie, she then steals herself a car and drives to where she believes Pearl and Henry are now living. Hattie, she sees the house she believes they live in. She walks up to the front door, and in the window she spots a record player, and she recognizes it as the same record player her and Pearl used to share when they were roommates. Hattie is certain that she has the right house. She knocks on the door. She waits for Pearl to open it. She's gonna attack her. But instead, when the door opens, it is an old couple. Hattie says that she's an old friend of Pearl's and is wondering where she is. And the old couple says that Pearl and Henry moved out 6 months ago and sold them the place. All that is left of them is that old record player there. They said they didn't want it, that they moved on to a newer model. And Hattie asks where Pearl and Henry said they were going. And the old couple says that they said they were moving to the East Coast. We see an image of Pearl and Henry driving in their convertible on the open road. Next, we see Hattie Hargrove, and we assume she killed the old couple, and she took her old record player back, and she gets into her car and continues on her hunt for Pearl. And Hattie comments to herself, "Oh, Pearlie, looks like I just missed you. That's okay, though. You wander wherever you want, high, low, left, right. I'll catch up to you soon enough. Meanwhile, I've got good music to listen to, I've got gas in my tank, and all the time in the world." And that is the end of Volume 2. Alright, so that was Volume 2 of American Vampire. My thoughts on this volume: I liked the 1930s Las Vegas setting. I like how in this book, each volume, each story arc, we're seeing a new version of America. We're in a new decade, we're in a new time period, a new place, and that change of scenery keeps it fresh and exciting, so I did like that. I liked some of the new characters we met in Las Vegas, so Cash McCoogan, and seeing an older Felicia Book, and seeing this Vassals of the Morning Star, a pretty fun organization, vampire killers, and we're going to see them a lot throughout this series. I like learning about the lore of the vampires within this book, and seeing what Scott Snyder makes up with the lore. So what is the deal with the American vampire? What's their strengths and weaknesses? The Carpathian vampire, what's their deal? And then these new vampire species. So we had the Strigus Gaelic Prime species in this volume. Fun seeing some of the differences there. And as this series progresses, we're gonna see all sorts of new vampire species. And that's kind of really fun to keep track of and imagine them fighting and figuring all that out. So that's really fun. I liked the confrontation this volume with Gus McCoogan trying to kill these Hoover Dam people that are building the Hoover Dam. That was really good, and the mystery there. I liked the backstory we had with Pearl and Henry and seeing their life in California. And then this whole jazz club of these blood smugglers and that confrontation that goes down with Pearl and Henry was all pretty exciting. And seeing Hattie Hargrove coming back into the story and seeing what went down with her and where she is now. So lots of good threads going on in American Vampire right now. Now, part of the negative I have with this series is that sometimes Scott Snyder, I find, writes the book in a little bit of a confusing way. He's not making it clear exactly what's happening. So we had that whole confrontation with Skinner Sweet, and he's holding Cash McCoogan's wife, and he's going to inject her with the blood needle, and I wasn't fully clear what was happening. Like, did he prick her with the needle? Did he infect the baby? Like, I wasn't sure. Did that go down? Was he shot with a gold bullet then, or just a regular bullet? He fell out the window. How come he's not dead because he got shot with a gold bullet twice? What are the rules there? So, a little bit opaque what's going on. I was able to sort of figure it out and figure out that Cash's son became this vampire, and Cash seems to be traveling America with his kid, but it's not entirely clear sometimes what's going down. Also, I don't know if I fully buy into Pearl and Henry just stumbling into this jazz club of blood smugglers. I don't know if I fully buy into that. So there's a little bit of things that I'm not loving, but still, it is immense fun. It's still a really good time seeing this all go down, and it's exciting. So that kind of negates any of the story issues I have. So I'm going to give this volume an 8 out of 10 because it is just so exciting. All right, thank you all for watching, and I will be back with volume 3, where we will see some vampires during World War II. Exciting stuff. Stay tuned.